Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Husker Happenings. I'm your host, Gavin Adelman, and today we're just going to jump right into the guest segment this week with Matt Coatney. We're just going to skip the news this week. I'm just trying something new, just trying to change things up a little bit, and let me know what you guys think of this change on Instagram, on Snapchat, TikTok, wherever you find me. And now we have a Instagram account for this podcast at Husker Happenings Pod. Go give it a follow and send me a message saying that you heard this and let me know what you think of the new change, and if you want the news to come back, if you just like it just being a guest segment, let me know. So with that, I'll just jump right into Matt Coatney. Enjoy. Welcome back, and let's welcome in special guest Matt Coatney to Husker Happenings. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me today. Excited to be here.
Do you want to start off by giving the listeners a little quick synopsis of your career and life so far, and like hometown, high school, stuff like that?
You know, I think a lot of people think I grew up in Nebraska, but actually I grew up in Southwest Missouri. My hometown is Springfield, Missouri. The two people you've probably heard of who went to Kickapoo High School include Brad Pitt and myself. He was a year ahead of me, and his brothers and sisters were behind me in school. I went to college at what was Southwest Missouri State University and learned a lot about radio in a booth very similar to where we're recording this here today. Moved to Nebraska back in the mid-1990s. I was the original radio voice of Missouri State Lady Bears basketball. When I was in college, I spent 8 years in the United States Navy as a cryptologist. I speak Persian Farsi. I translated that when I was in the Navy. And full-time, I think most people think I broadcast sports full-time. Full-time, I'm in my 28th year with the Department of Motor Vehicles. I'm the administrator of the Driver's Licensing Services Division. But my fun vocation is broadcasting Husker sports. I'm our studio anchor for the Husker football broadcast, and then just finished my 25th year as the voice of Husker women's basketball.
How did you get into like radio and broadcasting?
You know, it's interesting. Back when I was in 7th grade in a little town in Missouri, Miller, Missouri, population 676, the junior high and the high school were connected. And the 7th grade English teacher also was the high school newspaper sponsor. And on the second day of 7th grade, she came in to the class and she said, "Who here knows anything about sports?" And I raised my hand. She says, "Congratulations, you're going to write sports for the high school newspaper because none of my high schoolers like sports." And I found out I couldn't write very quickly. I couldn't take notes at the high school football games. So my mom got me a Panasonic cassette tape recorder so I could speak my notes into it. And I found out Johnson, gain of 5 weren't very good notes. And so it started turning into a little bit of a play-by-play call to transcribe my notes. And one day a lady in the stands tapped me on the shoulder. She says, "We love listening to you. We always try and sit behind you. How much do you sell your tapes for?" And I said, I don't do this to make money. She says, "I'll give you $5. I said, "Sold." So it kind of started that way. And then in high school, these were the early days of cable television, believe it or not. My high school was the first high school to have live broadcast capabilities in Springfield, Missouri, which is a town about the size of Lincoln. And we broadcast every sporting event that our high school had. So I think I probably did 100 and some odd games on cable television in high school, commercial free. It was the greatest training ever. Wrestling events, baseball, basketball, football, you name it. And one day, the sports director at a local TV station came out and sat next to me. He says, "I listen to you every night on Access Channel 11. How would you like to be my sideline reporter, do third quarter play-by-play? You get free cable and $25 a game." And I was 18 years old, and that's how it started.
And that's actually kind of interesting with the cassette tape recorder. That was what my grandpa actually used to use when he would take notes, because he worked with the UNO extension doing ag stuff.
Yeah.
So that's how he would take notes. And I actually have one of his old ones with some of his old tape on it, which it doesn't sound great anymore because it was sitting in a Quonset for
Oh,
20 years. But
they degrade.
yeah.
They degrade. Trust me, I have a lot of tapes. I know that.
So, like, what was your first professional radio gig? Was it the Husker one, or would it have
Oh
been?
no, no, no.
Uh,
That was Telecable of
right.
Springfield, third person on the crew, and I would. The guy who hired me, Rob Evans, was in professional baseball also, and he would be gone quite a bit for other gigs. So I was on TV at the age of 18, 1 to 2 nights a week, and when he moved away to take a full-time professional baseball broadcasting job, I was a TV sports director at age 19. Half-hour sports talk show with any major league talent who came into town, and local college and high school coaches, and the local high school game of the week and the local small college game of the week. And so that's how it really started off for me.
And who is somebody that you admire and look up to, either in the past when you were still in college and stuff, and even now?
Well, I think the play-by-play announcers when I was growing up that I really wanted to emulate starts with Jack Buck, the longtime play-by-play voice of the St. Louis Cardinals, still my favorite team. We only got 1 or 2 Cardinal games a month on TV back when I was a kid, so you would listen to your radio, and he would paint that picture. And my dad and I would listen to every game, and then on TV, Kurt Gowdy was kind of what they call the voice of God. He and Pat Summerall were the big network voices on the National Football League, and Kurt Gowdy on NBC just had a style that I loved. So those were the two people. And then, people who have mentored me, Art Haynes, who used to do the Dallas Cowboys pregame and postgame show and is now the studio anchor for the Kansas City Chiefs, gave me my first job in college broadcasting in 1985 when he was the voice of Missouri State. He called me up and said, "The school wants to broadcast women's basketball. We want you to do it." And to this day, the way I anchor the Husker football studio broadcast is a direct reflection of things I've learned from Art. I listen to him religiously on Sundays when the Chiefs play. So those are some of my influences, I think.
And do you have a favorite part about doing doing the football anchoring?
It is so live. It's my favorite thing. I think hosting Big Red Reaction is something that I couldn't do when I was in my 20s. I think you have to have lived life a little bit because the show is about the callers. You learn very young in broadcasting and that you need to be interesting. You want to keep people from hitting the seek button on their car radio. But Big Red Reaction is very raw, very live. People haven't had time to read any blogs, any newspaper stories, or watch any TV talking heads. It's what they think immediately after the game. And you need to give people that room, but also challenge callers if their take is a little suspicious. Sometimes you have to be empathetic. And sometimes your other listeners need to know that you don't agree with the caller, but you're not going to embarrass the caller. And that's a real trick. It's one of the few jobs that you have to be at your best 10 hours into your workday. I love what I do because I have to prepare scoreboards. And in today's world, I have to find something you can't get on your phone that's different, that you're not going to see on ESPN. And that's very challenging. So I love what I do with football because it's never the same. And it is live as it can get. And I love live events.
And then do you have a favorite part about broadcasting the women's basketball games?
It's part of my life. I was on stat crew at Missouri State before they even started broadcasting women's basketball. I've been part of women's basketball since it became a Division I sport and broke away from AIAW back in the 80s. It's the people, no question about it. The players become kind of part of my family. I'm still in touch with players who I did games for 40 years ago at Missouri State. When we were in the NCAA tournament a couple of weeks ago down in Fort Worth, Louisville's head coach is a good friend of mine. There's always going to be somebody who I run into at the arena wherever we go. It's the people is certainly, and then The other thing is knowing I am painting a picture for the listener
Mhm.
and giving them information that they wouldn't get if they were watching it on TV is very, very gratifying to
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like listening to you guys and Kent and Jake and all the Husker radio broadcasters because you guys bring something that you can't see. You guys
Yeah.
bring the kind of what's happening, not just physically like there, but also behind, like kind of emotionally
Yeah.
and kind of stuff you can't really see on the TV broadcast, but you can tell are happening.
I think some of the biggest compliments I've gotten have been from opposing listeners
Mm.
who have said, clearly you're the Nebraska announcer, but you taught us things about our team that we really didn't even know. I got a really nice note from a fan in Martin, Tennessee, many years ago. There was some kind of weather event, and their radio crew couldn't get here, and they hired the Huskers radio network to provide the feed of the game to their home network. And so we're still going to give you the Nebraska angle, but I didn't change anything. But they were very impressed how well we knew their team. And I think that's the thing that, women's basketball is such a part of me. I travel with the team. I know the coaches. I know the players. And so if I'm doing my job correctly, that should come through on the air, and it sounds like it does. So I appreciate those warm words.
Yeah. What's a favorite memory you have, or multiple if you can't pick one, from radio and broadcasting games?
Oh, how long do we have? Favorite memories? There are so many. My first Division I broadcast was at Barnhill Arena, Missouri State at Arkansas in 1985, and to think that I was doing a Division I radio broadcast, I couldn't believe it. My first real TV event in which I was the sports director was a high school football game between Miami, Oklahoma, and Springfield Parkview High School, and I couldn't believe that they were letting me do that. Those are some great memories. At Nebraska, there are too many to count. I think, the win to finish an undefeated regular season in 2010 with the women's basketball team. You try not to prepare things to say because then it sounds like you prepared things to say. The way I ended the broadcast, Jeff Greash, who is our sports information director, used what I said. If you look in the media guide, the first paragraph on the history of Husker women's basketball is what I said at the end of that broadcast. I said something to the effect of, this team likes to practice, and they say practice makes perfect, and now they are perfect regular season. I don't know where that came from, but it's one of my favorite memories because you really hope that at that intersection of an important moment that you're up to it and you have the right thing to say. And that kind of told me right there, I'm not a pretender. I came up with the right thing to say at the perfect moment. So there's too many memories, too many games, but those are some things that come to mind.
And do you have any favorite sports memories when you were just watching the game, playing, when you weren't broadcasting?
You mean just as a fan?
Yeah, just as a fan or as a participator or participant.
The St. Louis Cardinals have had such an impact on me, and I lost my dad early in my senior year of high school. Earlier that year, he really became a fan of Willie McGee, who was a rookie, and he was kind of a odd-looking outfielder who was kind of a throw-in in a trade with the New York Yankees, and then several years later, Willie McGee was that same year he was the MVP of the World Series. About a month after my dad died, and that was really special. Hearing my best friend Don West, who has been the longtime voice of Missouri State, now their TV broadcaster, first time he did an event nationally, meant a lot to me because I knew the work he had put in, and he, I think, unnecessarily gives me too much credit for his career, but I certainly was there. I think about some of the greatest sports events I've seen. I remember the USA beating the Soviet Union in the 1980 Olympics when I was a teenager. It's hard for me to describe to young people like you just what the mood of the country was at the time and how that really made everybody, their emotions swell. There are times that sports can transcend everything bad that's going on in life and really give you a sense of pride. And so those are some things I would say.
One big question I have to ask.
Okay.
Where did you get You Betcha?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. Okay, so this was not anything that I sat around thinking about. It was 1994, and I mentioned Don West a moment ago. He and I used to be the radio crew at Missouri State. And it was Missouri State against Drake. Drake's head coach was Lisa Bluter, who just retired last year as the head coach of Iowa women's basketball. And we had a player named Melody Howard who was going to set the NCAA record for threes in a game with 11. And Don said, "Can she hit the record? You betcha." Okay? So many years later, now I've moved to Nebraska and I'm doing the Nebraska game. And internet streaming was very new. And back in the day, Don and I, whenever we were within radio range, we would listen to each other to critique and not tell the other one we were listening. And we'll say, "Hey, you didn't give the score for 2 minutes." Our rule is you better have time and score within 1 minute of somebody tuning in. But with internet streaming, you start listening to everything. And he told me he was going to be listening that night, and so somebody hit a big three-pointer for Nebraska. And I thought, okay, I need to let Don know I know he's listening without saying anything. So I said, if I say this, he's going to know, hey, this is for you. So I did this. That night, I got home. My son Nate, who was a teenager, says, "Hey, you need to stay with that three-point call." And I said, "What three-point call?" Had no idea what he's talking about. And the next game, I came to the Devaney Center, and Abby Swatsworth, who for years has sat across from me behind the scores table, had made a sign that said, "You betcha." And then Bill and Diane Stewart and Aurora, the next game, had a red sign that said, "You betcha," and asked me to autograph it. And I thought, what happened here? And then a fan got mad at me because I was trying to do it only on the big dagger ones. And this fan got mad at me. She said, "I told my friends that wasn't a three-pointer because you didn't say you betcha, and I was wrong, and you made me look bad." So it has been every three-pointer since then, no matter how undramatic it is. I'm very proud of it because I share it with my best friend. It's become part of the program. If you talk to Amy Williams, they love that. That immediately tells people it's Husker women's basketball. It's been on ESPN. It's been a Valentine's Day card. It's been 18 different versions of T-shirts. And I used to think I don't want to be the "I've fallen and I can't get up" guy, and I don't want to be the "where's the beef" guy. I don't want to be the "you betcha" guy. But fans love it. Why would I run away from it? It's become a part of me. So it was just a way for me to say hi to my buddy.
What's your favorite sport?
Oh, baseball. I think people get very surprised when I don't say women's basketball or football. I remember I was filling in as a public address announcer for Husker baseball one night, and a fan sent me a direct message on Twitter. Said, "We didn't know you knew anything about baseball. We thought you only knew stuff about women's basketball." And I almost sarcastically replied with, "Well, yeah, I grew up wanting to be a girls basketball player, and I used to live with the baseball coach at Missouri State, Keith Gutton, very successful coach who just retired. I worked in sports information. I umpired softball for 31 years. It's my second favorite sport. So baseball and softball are a huge, huge part of my life."
And you said you're a Cardinals fan. I'm a Royals fan.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sorry.
We have 2015, but then after that
Hey, whoever your team is, make sure that's your team through thick and thin. If you're an instant add water Royals fan, we're going to have some problems. But if you're with your team every year, congratulations.
Yeah, and my girlfriend and I are going to be moving to St. Louis, so we're going to have to kind of become Cardinals fans.
Have you been to a game at Busch Stadium?
Not yet.
It's heaven. So, believe me.
I can't wait for my first game.
You'll love it.
If you could call any sporting event, what would it be?
Oh, wow. If I could call any sporting event. I would love to do a World Series broadcast. I think I'll tell you about how lucky I am. When the Cardinals played the Red Sox back in 2013 in the World Series, um, because of my work obligations, obviously I didn't get a chance to go. And we had been in the Big Ten for a couple of years by then. And media guides, these big, bulky preseason publications they used to do, started getting phased out, and all the information was digital.
Mm.
Well, I used to get about 10 media guides a day during October and leading up to women's basketball, and I had a huge envelope, media guide size, and it was postmarked from Iowa State Athletic Office. And I thought, why? One, is Iowa State sending me a media guide? We're not in their league anymore. And two, nobody does media guides anymore. And it was a game program from game one of the World Series from Iowa State women's basketball coach Bill Fenley, who's been a longtime friend of mine. He said, my wife and I said, it's not right that Matt isn't here. He needs a game program. And when you ask me what's my favorite part about broadcasting women's basketball, it's the people. Fans are like, oh, I hate this coach and I hate this player on the other team. And I have so many friends around the country, especially head coaches on other teams. So World Series, to do a World Series game, I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And then who do you have on color?
What's that?
Who do you have on color?
Oh, boy. Now that's a great question. Baseball on radio doesn't really lend itself to a two-man booth. If I was on TV, I'd want Tim McCarver. If I was on radio, you don't really need a color announcer. You don't think of Vin Scully and.
Yeah.
You don't think of Jack Buck and Bob Prince and. And because people so associate me with radio, I'll tell you this about when I look at sports broadcasters. If they can do baseball, they can do almost every sport, because baseball is about painting a picture and telling a story. And so I don't think I'd want a color announcer for radio. On TV, Tim McCarver's the best there's ever been.
Yeah, that painting a picture part with baseball radio, that's what made Greg Sharp. He was just the Picasso of baseball radio.
Greg, I've known a lot of people in broadcasting, and you can't really do what we do unless you have some ego. I mean, you put a microphone in front of your face, you better have a little chutzpah. Greg never showed it outwardly. If he had any ego, I never saw it, and he was one of the few head voices of a network that made sure he recognized everybody else. He would always say on the air, listen to John Baylor and Lauren Cook West, listen to Ken Pavelka, Jake Neuheisel, listen to Matt Coatney and Jeff Breach, and he didn't have to do that. It's a huge hole in our network. It's still so recent that it's hard to believe he's not here.
Now we've got some non-sports related questions.
I'll roll up my sleeves here.
Yeah. Okay. First off is a pretty tough one. If you could have dinner with any three people, dead, alive, fictional, who would they be and why?
My dad, who I lost when I was 17, to get his take on what I've done with my life. Certainly. I would also love, I think, to talk to the Shah of Iran, because the turmoil that happened in Iran from the time of the Pahlavi dynasty up through the Muslim Revolution in 1979, I would like to ask him, how did you get there? Because I've spent a significant part of my life studying Iran, especially with my time in the United States Navy. And Kurt Gowdy, he played such a huge role in my young life with the way he hooked me, with the way he broadcast games. I just like to tell him thanks.
I actually have a question about your time in the Navy.
Yeah.
How did you get into doing the translating?
So I'm trying to get through school. My parents died when I was in high school, so I'm on my own. I'm trying to take 15 hours of class. I'm trying to work all these broadcasting jobs, and it wasn't really working out. And I went down to the Air Force, and I knew they had Armed Forces radio and television, and they had me record a 5-minute fake newscast and 2 commercials, and they sent it off to Fort somewhere or some Air Force base, and came back and told me, they say you have absolutely no abilities as a broadcaster. When I found out later, the recruiter lied to me. They just didn't have anything open right then. If I'd have waited 3 months, they could have got me in, and I got mad. And I went home, and the Navy recruiter called me because his office was next door. He said, "You didn't come talk to me." I went to high school with his son. I said, "You don't have Armed Forces Radio and Television." He said, "No, but we have a great foreign language program, and I know you took Latin and Spanish in high school with my son." And so I went down and talked to him, and I was intrigued. And if the Air Force hadn't lied to me, there's no way I would have gotten into it. I certainly would have stayed in that the rest of my life. My wife at the time, her mom was dying of cancer. They wanted to send me to an Air Force base in north of London, and we had just had twins, and I had a 3-year-old, and they wouldn't let the twins fly until they were 6 months old in case there were medical problems. So I made a hard decision, got out of the service, and we ended up here in Nebraska near her sister in Beatrice to get help with the kids, and voila, next thing you know, here I am. So it's funny how life will take those turns, but it's the favorite job I've ever had by far.
And then, do you have a favorite music genre, artist, and song?
I believe that yacht rock should be renamed the Matt Coatney Songbook. I freaked out on April 1st. I thought it was an April Fool's joke because on Sirius XM, yacht rock radio was gone off whatever channel it was on. They had moved it to channel 15. I am a child of the 70s when Dominique Kelly, whose nickname was the mayor of Lincoln, Dominique Kelly Johnson, very successful basketball coach at Lincoln High, great Husker. When her freshman year, she was sitting across from me on the bus, and she was singing some 70s R&B tunes. And so I started singing Teddy Pendergrass and Barry White and the Temptations, and she said, "No, wait a minute. How do you know these songs?" I said, "You just keep singing those." And Neek and I, we sang for 4 years. I really think in a previous life I was part of the Philadelphia sound of the mid '70s. Probably should have been on Soul Train. That's my music. Al Green. There's nothing better. Michael McDonald, Blue Eyed Soul, Hall & Oates. And I've never left it.
Are you a big Chicago guy?
I love Chicago. Great story about Chicago. Very dear friend of mine is Mackenzie Huck, who used to be the news anchor on 10/11 on the weekends a few years ago. She's from my hometown, much younger than me. And she and her now fiance, Mackenzie's a big Cardinals fan like me. She wanted to get Trent to a Cardinals game, but they also wanted to go to Chicago, but they'd never been to Chicago, and they were a little uneasy. I said, "Let's just go." So 3 of us went there. Well, Trent told me he wanted to propose. He says, "You got to find me a place in Chicago." So I took him down by Grants Park to Buckingham's Buckingham Fountain, got a great photo of the proposal, and they asked me to officiate their wedding. So I'm going to officiate their wedding later this year. Former Husker women's basketball trainer Susie Lesner is a school teacher in Chicago. She asked me to officiate her wedding in Chicago a few years ago. I love the town. There's so much to do there. It's easy to get to. Half the time I fly, half the time I drive. I'm never in a bad mood when I'm in Chicago. Why did you ask me specifically about Chicago?
Well, I was thinking the band, Chicago.
Okay. I took it a completely different way. I would say the song 25 or 6 to 4 helped me get through Navy boot camp. Whenever I felt my energy going away and we would go on a run or do push-ups, that song kept me motivated. Love Peter Cetera's vocals. We lost Terry Kath way too young. And, you know, they've been through the wars. They've had so many different people in there. And they have great ballads. They have great rock standards. Jimi Hendrix once said their horn section is one lung. So now that I know you're talking about the original band, Chicago Transit Authority, which got shortened to Chicago, I'm a huge Chicago fan. So.
Yeah. Me and my girlfriend went last May to their concert in Omaha, and then we're going again, and when they're going to be here in Lincoln this summer. So
Robert Lamb is still kind of leading things there, and I still think, let's see, the saxophone player, he left, they replaced him, but the trombone player And the trumpet player is still
Yeah.
there. Yeah, those are still the original guys.
Yeah, Lee Lochnade's there.
Yeah, Lee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what a great band.
Mm-hmm.
Now I just every one of their songs to me is singable.
Mm-hmm.
And I stop what I'm doing when I hear a Chicago song.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I didn't recognize, because you're throwing me questions and all different things. I'm like, what do you think about Chicago? Oh, it's great. So what do you think about New Orleans? What do you think about San Francisco?
All right. Now for a fun final segment called Husker History, a little Husker trivia.
Oh boy. Okay, this could be fun.
Yeah. I have 5 Huskers-related trivia questions. You all have as much time as you want to answer them.
Okay.
And I'll give you the answer after you say your answer for each question.
Okay.
And the leaderboard so far has a total of 1 person. It is Aaron Sorensen, who has the current record of 2 out of 5 from last episode.
Okay, a lot of pressure.
So,
okay.
Ready? Okay. Question number 1. What is Nebraska football's all-time win-loss record against the Kansas State Wildcats?
Wow.
Is it?
Wow.
Oh, it's multiple choice.
Choices?
It's multiple choice. 80-13-1.
What was the first number again?
80-13-1.
80-13-1. Okay.
70-20-3. 78-15-2, or 80-15.
Well, I tell you what, I sat through some really bad Kansas State games. My girlfriend went to Stevens College when I was a young man. I sat through a Kansas State Missouri game in the rain that was one of the worst things I've ever seen. So there were many years that Nebraska just beat up on Kansas State, but they were pretty good in the 60s. So they started playing. The series isn't as long as the Kansas series, but almost as long. And what are the loss? Give me the middle numbers again.
13, 20, 15, and then 15 again, but with no ties.
Yeah, I'd say the 15 with a tie.
The 78-15-2.
Yeah.
Yep. Correct. There's 1.
All right. At least I didn't get shut out on this one.
All right. Question number 2, which you should get.
Uh-oh. That's a lot of pressure.
In what season did Nebraska women's basketball set the program record for home single-season attendance average? Was it 2015-2016, 2023-24, 2013-14, or 2009-2010?
Yeah, you didn't even need to give me the choices. It was 2009.
Yeah.
2000. It was a magical season. I remember Gary Blair, the Texas A&M coach, walked up to me underneath the basket when I came out, and he said, "How in the heck have you guys done this?" That was magical. That was a lot of fun.
All right. Number 3, who led the Husker men's basketball team in scoring in 2018-2019? Was it James Palmer, Isaac Copeland, Isaiah Roby, or Glenn Watson?
2018-19. Okay, so let me think back here. Watson was the last choice. What were the other 3?
James Palmer, Isaac Copeland, and Isaiah Roby.
So my gut reaction is Glenn Watson, and that's probably wrong. I'm going to go with Roby.
It was Palmer.
Man, I wouldn't have got that. That surprises me.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think he had 19.7
Really?
a game, I think, that year.
Yeah, that surprises me. Because I would think that Glenn Watson is a good distractor answer. That's one that, I'm okay.
Yeah. Number 4, who led the 2021 Nebraska baseball team in home runs? Was it Spencer Schwellenbach, Bryce Matthews, Max Anderson, or Jackson Hallmark?
Can I phone a friend?
Sure.
Yeah, call Ben McLaughlin. Yeah. Ben will be mad if I get this one wrong. So, I think Schwellenbach, people would think that he was a great hitter.
Yeah.
He was a great hitter. So Schwellenbach, Hallmark, what were the other 2?
Max Anderson and Bryce Matthews.
Schwellenbach. I'll go with Anderson.
It was Hallmark. That surprised me.
I don't think of him as leading a team in home runs. Yeah, that's a great question.
Because that was like Bryce Matthews and Max Anderson's freshman year, I believe, and they were good. They weren't when they
Yeah, a lot of times people think of somebody their last year and not what they did their first couple of years. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. And then number 5.
You think he's up on your own?
I looked through the record books.
Yeah, it's pretty
So-
good. No, these are pretty good questions.
And then number 5, to either take the lead at number 1 or to
Or be
stay tied at
be
number
tied with
1.
Aaron Sorensen. Okay.
So number 5, who led the 2022 Huskers softball team in multi-hit games? Was it Cam Ibarra, Sidney Gray, Billy Andrews, or Maya Felder?
Wow. So I traveled with that team to Michigan State when Nate Rohr had to stay here to be the PA voice of the spring game. And so, let me see, Olivia Farrell was the main pitcher on that team. So the natural reaction is Billy Andrews. The other choices were Felder, Ibarra, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who was the other one?
Sidney Gray.
See, now, so this is interesting. So we're looking for led the team in
Multi-hit games.
multi-hit games. So because Gray had that one really good season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw out Ibarra.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. That's what I'm gonna say. Just taking a look at those. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Those are
Yeah.
great questions, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
by the
that
way,
was-
Rhonda Revell's team is fun to travel.
Yeah.
They're the best.
So you got 3 right out of 5. That is
So
first
I'm on
place.
the leaderboard right now.
Yep, number 1.
Those are hard questions.
Yeah,
I'm impressed.
you'll have to see or listen back to episode 2 and figure out the questions for Aaron Sorensen, which were pretty tough.
Yeah.
I made them tough on her specifically because she's covering everything. So
Yeah.
I
Wow.
have to make it even harder. But
Yeah.
And then, is there anything else you want to talk about or ask me?
Anything I want to ask you, how do you like being in the band, since it's been a few years since 3 of my kids were in the band, and my son-in-law. So I've had 4 members of my family in the Cornhusker marching band.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun over the last 4 years. I've gotten to travel a handful of times with the pep band, but then this last season, I got to go to New York for the Pinstripe Bowl with the band, and that was the first time we'd traveled as a band since 2019.
Yeah.
To when we went to Illinois. I wasn't here, but that was the last road game or bowl game, anything we went to. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. We didn't really get to be in New York that long. We traveled over Friday afternoon. We flew into Long Island, drove like 2 hours to our hotel in Newark, and then went basically, and then we went to Times Square, had for a couple hours. It was really busy because it was, holiday season. But,
Yeah.
But we got to see the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, and then got up early next morning. It was raining, kind of gross outside. It was a little chilly, but went to the game. We weren't able to have our pregame rehearsal on the field because of the rain.
Yeah.
So we had to play our music for halftime in the stands because we couldn't play on the field. And we just played it from the stands, and then sat there for an hour before the game, or really about 2 hours before the game. And yeah, that performance was a lot of fun. Got to stand on Yankee Stadium on the kind of sloppy surface that we were on, but it was still an MLB stadium. That's crossed another one off the bucket list. That's 2 out of 30 now.
I'll just say there are worse things in the world than being a college student at the University of Nebraska, doing what you're doing, which is this. I think this would be a really cool project, what you're doing right here, and getting to be in the Cornhusker marching band. I've known a lot, and I mean a lot of members of the Cornhusker marching band. They are all great people.
Yeah.
And the band has had a great impact on them. So I'd like to say I'm very jealous of what you're doing. I've had a great life, but I wouldn't mind doing what you're doing right now. So enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's so much fun. Getting up at because I live 50 minutes from campus, so I have to get up even earlier than everybody else does. So I'm getting up at 5:45 to get to the stadium, to get ready, have breakfast, go to the stadium for rehearsal at 7 every single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have to be there at 6:30 most weeks for sectionals on Tuesdays, and then music memorization checks on Thursdays before a game day. But
it will make you a much more marketable employee
Yeah.
one of these days. People ask me all the time, especially for an 11 o'clock kickoff for Husker football. I've got an 11-minute Nebraska Lottery scoreboard, and there's no scores.
Yeah.
So it's what I'm giving you is a little nugget of that game coming up, and it's all preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people the preparation is the fun part. You don't realize that until you go through some things like you're going through with the band. So it's good for you.
Yeah, and we've also had some adversities throughout the time. We've had some hot games where we don't get to be in uniform when we really wanted to be, or we've been sitting in East Stadium in the sun for an entire football game. Like the Michigan game a couple years ago where we were just all sunburnt and we were just baking in the sun all day. And that was the game that I don't remember the final, but it was not
29-28, I think, or was that the blowout?
No, I think it was the blowout game where we
that was the one with the fumble late in the game.
Yeah,
that was a night game.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this is what I always tell people: if it's a good story 5 years from now, it was worth going through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that halftime show was a fun one. I'm trying to remember exactly what show it was, but it was the homecoming game, which was weird because every other homecoming game that we've had, I believe, has been a night game. But that one being a day game, and we that show was fun, but I don't remember what it was now.
One of you asked me some of my favorite moments when my son Ben was one of the drum majors. They did an Earth, Wind, and Fire tribute halftime show. And he specifically asked of the 3 drum majors to be on the stand for September, because that's my favorite song. And I don't know why the Big Ten Network broke away at halftime. They needed to fill some time or something, but they probably got a good 45 seconds of him being on the stand conducting that. I heard from people all over the country, and I've still got video of it at home. So that's another great memory I have that combines being a father, being a sports guy, and I'm on the air at the time, so I didn't know all that was going on.
Yeah, and it's actually funny. My very first game in the Cornerstone Marching Band was 2021. It was the Fordham game, and I think it was on BTN, and they showed a bit of pregame, and they panned to me at my very first Husker.
How about that? Huh?
And I was like, okay.
You never know, do you?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, this has been fun. Thank you for having me on today.
And then where can listeners find you?
Well, I am ubiquitous on social media. You can find me on the former Twitter, now known as X, at Coatman1, COATMAN1. You can friend me on Facebook, Matt Coatney. You can find me very easily there. You can find me on Snapchat, at Coatman1. And there might be some other places out there that I've forgotten about. But I get a lot of messages on Facebook Messenger from fans. I get a lot of direct messages on X from fans. I get a lot of Snapchat requests, and I love interacting with the fans.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And that'll wrap up this 3rd episode of Husker Happenings. Feel free to follow, interact with me on Instagram, X, and TikTok at HuskerGSA. Thanks for listening. Go Big Red, and remember to stay happening.